Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So we are here today to talk yet again about DBA fundamentals, one of my favorite topics. Today we have a great presentation from Rob Sewell on SQL Notebooks and Azure Data Studio for the DBA. Obviously going to be one of my favorite presentations, at least today. So we have everyone from the DBA Fundamentals group here, Steve Cantrell, Shane, Warwick, and myself. You can always reach out to us on dbafund.org. You can look at our past presentations on our YouTube channel. You can reach out to us on Twitter at DBAFund. You can hit us up on Slack, or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. So there's many ways you can reach out to us. Please be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions or just want to talk about some of the great things we talk about here. One of our sponsors is DB Watch, the database control. The Enterprise Manager, it truly is a complete solution for database administration, monitoring, performance tuning, security, and license management. So if you have not looked at their programs, please be sure to do so. They truly will help you out with any questions you have and hopefully make your life a little easier, which is what we're all about. Also, our other sponsor is SentryOne. I've been using some of especially their Plan Explorer for the last few years. It truly does make your life much easier if you're going through Explorer, looking at plans. So please be sure to reach out to them and get their free trial of any of their great applications, or reach out on their blog on answers.sqlperformance.com or resources. They have lots of great things to look at, review, and use. So today, we are talking with Rob Sewell, who has a great bio, and if you haven't seen it before, you will see it today. The beard. He is the man when it comes to the SQL beard. So with that, I turn it over to Rob Sewell.
Hello, hello. Thank you very much. So we're going to do something slightly different. So what you're going to need to do is grab your window and flip it like that. So I'm not going to share my screen. I'm just going to share my webcam for a moment. So make sure you make that big. It should be big for everybody. And as we go, if you have any questions, type them into the chat, and Kevin or Shane or anybody will just interrupt me and we'll go down whatever we do. The most important thing is that you learn what you need to know. So who am I? Or actually, what am I? Hello, here I am. That's why I want to share my webcam, because I can do cool stuff like this. So my name's Rob, and I'm a consultant. Basically, these days, that means I go into places and help them make stuff go. Once upon a time, I was a production SQL DBA. The best way to get in touch with me is on Twitter. So SQL DBA with beard. There's no A in there. It's not SQL DBA with a beard, because when I tried to change that to be my Twitter handle, I became SQL DBA with a bear, which I kept because it's kind of funny, but SQL DBA with beard. If you want to read what I write, then you can go to blog.robsewell.com, and I am lucky enough to be involved in the data community as well as the PowerShell community. And as part of that, I work on open source projects, including DBA tools, DBA checks, ADS notebooks, and Christy Lemaire and I are writing the Month of Lunches book for DBA tools, which you can find at beard.media/book. Oh yeah, people like to see how others work. This is how I work. And actually, surprisingly, there are no kittens. So normally you can see I've got a kitten bed here, and along the back there on the windowsill, normally in one of those places there would be a kitten to entertain you when you didn't want to look at me, but unfortunately it's food time, so they've gone away. At some point they might come and shout to come back in. So what are we talking about here? So this is Terry and indeed Simon, and that's a kitten. Come on then. There we go. As if by magic. So this is Seek. He can go on his bed. Terry and Simon, and they're data scientists. So what they do is they write Python and Spark and R, and they do predictions and models, and I don't understand what this stuff is. I'm not a data scientist. But these are the folk who started Jupyter Notebooks, not Terry and Simon, but data scientists in particular. They were the first ones who used Jupyter Notebooks. It's Jupiter. That's the planet Jupiter. That's the south pole of the planet Jupiter on a flyby by the spaceship Juno. But we're going to talk about this Jupiter. And this Jupiter's got a Y in the name. And first of all, the name is from the planet. No surprise there. Looks like the same. But also because of the languages that they use within the core of Jupiter, Julia, Python, and R. But most importantly, the reason is that Galileo was the first person to discover the moons of Jupiter. And his publication included the data. So when other people wanted to look at what he had done, they could reproduce his calculations because his data was included. And that was, magical for the time. And data scientists took this view, and that's how they wanted to be able to do things. So they wanted to include the data, make it easy to reproduce what they've done so that others could take that and improve it. So what is a Jupyter Notebook? Well, first of all, let's travel back in time. We don't need to go 88 miles an hour, but we do need to go back a decade and a half. Houston, we've had a problem. You see, we've been running queries. And when we run our queries, when beards were grey, in fact, when beards weren't grey, we used to use this sort of tool. We'd have some sort of beige box or a black box, and we'd run our SQL queries in there and we'd get our results back. We use Powershell. So all the versions of Powershell throughout the years, and every single one of them, including Visual Studio Code, has got the same problem. Let me point it out to you. That little icon, top right, with an X in it. This is our issue. And in fact, if we look at Management Studio, we've got the same problem. Even Azure Data Studio. Let's imagine that it's 2 o'clock in the morning and something's broken. And we're the ones that get called out. We get a pager or a phone call or however we're alerted, and we go and we log onto our laptops and we go and run some queries to find out what's wrong with our system. And maybe we run this query and we see that, the first product ID that comes back is adjustable race. And we go through and we look at that and we go, yeah, this is wrong. It shouldn't be adjustable race. That should have been taken out. That's why the thing is broken. So we make our changes, we update a table, maybe we run some checks, then we commit, then we make sure everything's working and we write it up, we go back to sleep. And the next morning, we're sat in a wash-up meeting, a follow-up meeting to the incident that has occurred. Why has this incident occurred? How were we notified? How could we have responded better? What things could we have done to improve the speed of our resolution or the stability of our system? And whilst you're going through that, you say, oh yes, well, you see, I ran the query that we've got. And when I came back, it had adjustable race at the top. That was the first one. So what I did is I disabled that product, and we moved forward and we made these changes, and then we tested it, and then everything was all right. One of your colleagues named Shane is, he's been asleep all day. He's come in nice and refreshed after his coffee into the office, or into his office in the Teams meeting these days. And he says, oh, no, Rob, you're wrong. Because if you'd run that query and it came up with adjustable race, then we would have been seeing that the web page was blue. And it wasn't, it was green. And we would have been getting slow response times to that middleware system. So I mean, it couldn't have been that. You say, no, I'm certain, definitely. Let me just open up my laptop and I'll have a look. But unfortunately, I've hit that cross. And when you hit the cross, the results of your query, you see, they are just gone. Oh, how many GIFs have we got? Loads. It's gone. They're all completely gone. So this is the #1 reason why I think Jupyter Notebooks are absolutely amazing, and why I think that as a DBA, these are things that we should look into using and bringing into our work processes. Come on, Rob. What is a Jupyter Notebook? As I said, I'm a production DBA by heart. So I'd like things to be a little bit simply explained. So somebody said to me, it's a document, good, that can contain text, code, executable code, images, oops, and a slide that didn't get hidden, and the query results. How cool is that? Imagine if I went back to that call out, then when Shane said, oh no, it couldn't have said that, I could have just opened up my notebook and gone, oh, well, no, look, here's the query that I wrote, and here are the results that I got. So this is a new scenario. So what are we going to do to learn how to fix this one better? I like to use Azure Data Studio to work with Jupyter Notebooks. Azure Data Studio, for people who don't know, is a cross-platform desktop program, IDE, whatever you want to call it. That's basically for data professionals. Yeah, I know it looks just like Visual Studio Code, and there's a very good reason for that, because that's Visual Studio Code and that's Azure Data Studio, and they look the same because they're based on the same code. The only thing that we've got additional in Azure Data Studio basically are some pretty colors. All right, it's a bit more than that, but as data professionals, we generally like to have things created that are colorful, that stand out, that enable us to see what we need to see into the things that we need to take action on. And Azure Data Studio enables these overlays so that we can have widgets and charts and graphs, and we can have much more information about our data platform environment. Some things that aren't in Azure Data Studio that are in Visual Studio Code are things like the debugger. So Visual Studio Code has a few more hardcore coding things available at the moment. The notebook story is a little bit confusing because at Ignite in this year, they announced .NET Interactive Notebooks. So these are coming through as another form of notebook that you can have. And basically they've got all of the goodness of Jupyter Notebooks, but you get PowerShell, PowerShell Core, and C# and F# and HTML and JavaScript as well, not T-SQL at the moment. So these are amazing. These are bringing much more functionality into notebooks. They enable cross-language notebooks, so you can run multiple languages in the same notebook. So that's really excellent. Some really cool stuff there, but it is a little confusing between .NET notebooks and what I call not .NET notebooks, the Jupyter notebooks, if you will. This is a .NET Powershell notebook. I prefer to use them in Azure Data Studio because I like Azure Data Studio and because I think they display them a bit prettier. This is a click, there we go. This is the same notebook in Visual Studio Code. So we've got Azure Data Studio and Visual Studio Code. And I think, you can see that Visual Studio Code doesn't quite look as good. Visual Studio Code also has this .NET interactive notebook extension. It's only in preview at the moment, but this will enable you to run .NET interactive notebooks without having to install Python. So if we're looking at this notebook in Visual Studio Code or this notebook in Azure Data Studio, these are .NET notebooks. The not .NET notebooks are the same. They need to have Python installed on your machine. So when you go through and you start to open a notebook, that's something that you're going to have to do. And you do have to do the install. Don't try and use a Python installation that you've already got. But this extension enables you to run .NET notebooks without needing Python. It's pretty cool. And just to make life even more confusing, there's a notebook mode in PowerShell Preview extension. It's pretty cool. It takes the comments, it makes them into Markdown, it lets you see your code easily, but it doesn't save the results. But it's there. If you search for notebooks, it's something else that you could find and you could see. So that's a quick overview of the Jupyter Notebook estate and what's available and how it's a little bit confusing. So let's think about the things that we could do with a Jupyter Notebook. We've talked already about 3 o'clock in the morning responding to incidents. That could be in 2 factors. That could be that you have a set of notebooks, and when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you start troubleshooting, you start to run through those. But it could also be something's gone wrong, open a blank notebook, start typing at the top what you found. A thing broke. I didn't know what it was. I connected to the instance. I ran this query. Type the query, get the results. I looked at the results and I saw this, so I thought I'd start working on that. Things like Brent Ozar's first responder kit, like Adam Mechanic's SP Who is active, like Glenn Berry's DMV queries. You're going to want to take some of those and embed them into these sort of notebooks that you're using. We can also create runbooks for things that you do regularly, where you're doing the same thing again and again, as a DBA, as a service desk member, as a business member with permissions, whatever it could be. You could create these notebooks to enable people just to follow some documentation and run things through. Hey, if we've got this documentation there, it's a really good way of introducing new team members. So when your new team member comes through, when somebody starts in your team, the hardest thing for you and for them is to get them used to your estate. And also to be able to carry on doing your job, because the reason they're there is because there's work to do. And you spend a lot of time helping them with the work or showing them what you're doing, which means that you're doing less work. So it takes a lot of time to get going. If you have a notebook set up where you can say, this is where our CMS is. Now you can go and see our naming convention, go and have a look at how our databases are named. This is how you can explore where our agent jobs are and where our DBA database is and the things that we've got in it. And you can have a notebook setting all those things up. It can make life much simpler. Or maybe as you learn new tasks from watching training or visiting conferences, virtually. You might take notes, you might create your own notebooks, you might take those back to your team, you might turn them into training documentation. Hey, now this is how we're going to improve indexes. This is how we're going to look at maintenance solutions. For doing demos, whether it's demos to new clients, hey, look at this cool funky thing that we've done for you. It's awesome. You should pay our company loads of money. Maybe it's to your team members. Look, we've got this new process and this is how we're going to use it. Here is a notebook to demonstrate it. And we've also got a notebook that's going to become part of the process. Your boss, I did this thing, isn't it cool? Please could I have a raise? Doing presentations like this. Working on open source projects. The best part about demos and the training part of the thing is that the results are saved with the notebook. So you can have your notebooks already preset with the results that are expected there. So that whoever's using them or whoever's viewing them could see the results without you even needing to run the code. You could maybe take your demonstration to a client offsite, not connect to anything, and just run through, well, these are the queries that we would run and these are the results that we would get. How about responding to your clients and their issues? Client phones up, I've got this problem with software and database that you have created for us. Excellent. Here's a notebook. If you could run this, make sure the results don't have anything that you don't want to share and send it back and we can have a look. Much easier than trying to arrange a convenient time, maybe across time zones, trying to enable, go to webinar to be allowed through the firewall for this particular thing, or maybe some approval processes that are needed for that. Just send a notebook over and then send it back with the results. Saves everybody time. Basically, the universe is your oyster. Fly like that shooting star and go and find things that you can do with notebooks. Here's something from Julie from the Microsoft Tools team. It's Microsoft's incident, or one of the Microsoft team's incident response flow. It starts like this. An incident is entered into the incident response system. Maybe it's from some metrics, it's auto-generated. Maybe it's from an alert. Maybe it's because somebody phoned the service desk and said the system is broken. A person, whether it's the service desk, whether it's the on-call team, whether it's level 2, whatever they are called, they then need to investigate and mitigate this incident. So they go to their troubleshooting repository and they find their notebooks and they start to run through a notebook as the audit trail for this incident. Once they've resolved the incident, they then have a post-mortem. And the post-mortem is designed to go through all of those questions we talked about earlier about making sure the incident works, but also to make the notebook even better. And then you can update the notebook, you push it back into the repository, you could rate it, so you can identify which notebooks need to be worked on when you've got a little bit of quiet time. Go and improve the documentation for this notebook. It'll make it easier for the next time this happens. That's if you've got an existing notebook. If you haven't got an existing notebook, then just create one. Create a new notebook, do the same thing. We'll do the investigation, we'll do the mitigation. Now, probably this part within the post-mortem is going to take a bit longer because after you've gone through the post-mortem scenario, you're still going to have to update this notebook because you probably rushed through and put minimal notes in. So you need to make it worthwhile for the next person that's going to use it, and then put it into the troubleshooting repo, and then it's available for the next time that it gets used. And you can log the results into the incident system so everybody can see what had happened. Automation is the key here. Automate as much of this process as you possibly can. Okay, so that's probably enough talk about notebooks. You probably want to have a look at it, but before you do, I expect you're saying, how do you do this? This is cool. Well, I hope you're saying it's cool. So I took a bit of PowerShell and a bit of PowerPoint and Streamlab Obs, and that's it. And I wrote about it at that link there, beard.media slobs automation. The end's fallen off the end for some reason. And that will help you to do this cool thing where you can just appear magically within your PowerPoint. So I am going to say, let's have a look at some code. And I know from experience that sometimes when I do this, the video starts to go a bit choppy and people stop being able to see. So if that happens, we could flip over and we'll swap onto sharing screen. But otherwise, if we start with something like, let's get ourselves vaguely ready, something like this, then I think that looks cool because you can see the code up here and you can see me and you can see the kitten that is now sleeping his tea off. So there we go. Are there any questions, question meisters?
There is a question asking if there is a notebook for dummies or some other quick start guide to how to start.
Oh, okay. So, is there a notebook for dummies? I'm not sure particularly for dummies, but hopefully I can give you something that'll help you get going. So one thing I wanted to start off by saying, I'll hopefully answer that, and if I don't, come back to me and give me a shout later on if I haven't answered that question. Any more questions, Shane?
Not at this moment. We're looking forward to the demo.
Ah, good. So you want to find out where my stuff is. So github.com, SQL DBA with a beard, and I have the answer to your question. If we go to presentations, the PowerPoint that you saw was actually from SQL Saturday Oregon in the 2020 folder. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to guesstimate as to whereabouts I got. Let's try this notebook. Here we go. Nope, I am going to have to guesstimate where it is. And let's try something like Edinburgh. There we go. So if you look in the SQL Saturday Edinburgh folder, what you'll find is a number of notebooks. So let's look at this notebook in GitHub, because it makes me show you something that's cool about GitHub. And one of the cool things about GitHub is it renders the notebook. Really cool. You can't execute the code, but everything else is there. So this one, number one, Markdown in SQL Notebooks, is going to show you how to open a notebook, how to use Markdown, the spaces, headers, how to write lists, links and images, show you how to do some pictures, and it's going to show you some GIFs as well, because you can put GIFs in your notebooks. Now, you might be thinking, why are we going to have silly GIFs like this? I mean, those ones are because it was the Scottish SQL Saturday in Edinburgh, but screen capture software will turn screencasts into GIFs. So the story is that a picture tells 1,000 words and a video tells 1,000 pictures or something like that. If you've got a set of steps which you've explained, maybe your users are still getting wrong, you could take a screencast, convert it into a GIF, put it into your notebook. So there is a starter notebook. It's in the SQL Saturday Edinburgh folder.
Sorry, Rob, just to let you know, we got a couple of comments saying that video is coming across blurry.
It's really odd the way it does that. Well, that just means that you're not going to be able to see me anymore, which is a shame because I like being seen. Oh no, actually, because I could do that, and then I can do. Oh, which monitor should we pick? What do you reckon? Should we try that one, Shane?
That was good.
There we go. So that's showing a screen.
It is, and it's coming through clear as well.
Yeah, I cannot explain it. It always happens at that point. The presentation works okay, and then the demo doesn't. Anyway, so that's where we can find presentations. Other thing that I'm going to show you is Jupyter Notebooks repository, because this is where all of my notebooks are. So we'll go to Notebooks folder. We've got not.net. So these are the Jupyter Notebooks that are just going to work with T-SQL, with PowerShell, Python, Spark. They're going to run in Azure Data Studio. And we've got .NET notebooks. These are the ones that are going to use PowerShell Core and C#, F#, HTML, JavaScript. So you will see those. But let's not look at those there. Let's go and have a look at them over here. In fact, so I did this, well, I did a presentation very similar to this to SQL Day today. And as you can see, we've still got it open. So this is Azure Data Studio. In Azure Data Studio, the one thing that you want to do, the most important thing that you should learn about using Azure Data Studio or Visual Studio Code is Control, Shift, and P. If you're on a Mac or a Linux, then you use Command, Shift, and P. That's going to open up the command palette. And the command palette gives you the capability of finding the commands that you want to use. You can see that it automatically moves the most recent commands up to the top. So top one you can see there is developer toggle screencast mode, and that's what's showing you my key presses as I enter them. And we can also then just start, if we can't do it there, we have to come out, Control Shift and P. If we then started typing notebook, you can see we're going to get all of the commands we have available to do with notebook. Now there are a number of ones there. Obviously, my one for new notebook comes up to the top. Because it's highlighted, I can then hit enter. And now I'm going to have my notebook. And my notebook has got a new cell button, plus cell. That'll enable us to get a code block or a text block. We've got a button here that says run all. That one will run all of the code blocks, one after the other, serially. It's a good thing to use if you want it to. If you have a large number of code blocks, then you might find that Azure Data Studio will crash. What's a large number? 20, something around that sort of number. I haven't found a precise answer to that question. Then we've got our kernel. So this is our kernel. It's not like a Linux kernel. This is the kernel that defines which language our notebook is going to run. Again, these are not .NET notebooks. These are the ordinary notebooks. We can run a single kernel. And oh yeah, Rob, you said this is documentation. Surely I can just say, hey, run this one, and that'll do the SQL bit. And then I want to run some PowerShell. So just change the kernel to PowerShell, and then we can run the next cell block. Don't do that. That won't work. It just well, it might work, but it more likely is going to cause trouble and cause corruption. And of course, I would always say that if you wanted to run SQL commands as well as PowerShell commands, then use a PowerShell notebook and use invoke DBA query or invoke SQL command to run the SQL. But that's by the by. We also got here our attach. This is going to just be our connect. Please connect to this instance. And you might have to write in documentation, hey user, this notebook is for our bicycle making factory system. You'll need to connect to this instance and tell them what to put in there. You'll see that we also get, when we start a new notebook, 2 little buttons, a code and a text button, enabling us to start. So let's start. Let's make this go away. Oh, let's make it go away. There we go. And we'll start with a text button. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here because this is what you're going to get. You're going to get this, and we could choose what sort of headings we want. We could format our code. So we could say DBA fundamentals. Here we go. Never type in a demo, they say. I say always type in a demo because then it proves you're a human being. And we can make that into a heading. And then maybe now we're going to have, this is the first important point. Oh no, that's a bit big, isn't it? Perhaps we'll make that. There we go. Oh no, I'll make that to heading 2. There we go. Number 1 bullet point. That's funny because what I've done is I've gone straight to Markdown. Let's add. There we go. So we've got our bullet points there. So now we can start writing number 2. Maybe we're going to tab that in, have that one indented. Now, I personally don't use this view very often because you can see up here, we've got this button. This is our default view, the WYSIWYG view. We've got, this is our Markdown, and then this is just pure Markdown. So this is a split screen, sorry, this is a split screen Markdown, and this is just pure Markdown. So that's just our Markdown, and this is a split screen. This is where I spend a lot of time because I am very comfortable with working in adding heading, then we'll have a list, we'll have number 2, we'll have number 3. So you see, I'm quite happy working in Markdown, and you know, I just kind of think that this is funny because you can write whatever you like here, 145 998, and over here you'll get 1, 2, and 3. And in fact, you know, let's just, for the sake of having a bit of fun, it doesn't matter if you renumber them either. Still come out as 1, 2, and 3. This is where I spend a lot of my time. So it's up to you. When you're writing your documentation, then you can, if you're comfortable, write it straight in Markdown, completely blank Markdown, that's fine. If you like to see what your user's going to see and write Markdown, then you can use this split. Or if you like WYSIWYG, then you could just use this. Now, there are some, oops, let's try adding a text cell, Rob, instead of a code cell. Now, there are some really, really cool things that we can do in this WYSIWYG that we can't do in anywhere else. So let's see, what have we got? I know what we can do. So I'm going to show you this. So this is my ops. This is how I managed to do some of that magic. And I'm going to press Control and Shift and S. And that's going to give me a screenshot. So let's take that and we'll take that. There we go. So we've taken a screenshot. So just imagine we were doing some documentation, taking a screenshot, and now I'm going to go Control and V. And look at that. Smack bang in our notebook, we've just got a terrible picture of my face, but whatever it is that we're doing. How cool is that? That's awesome. Really cool for writing our documentation. Let's show you something else cool. Let's do the same thing again, change it. This will be your default view. I have mine set differently. Now I know that many of you have got all of your code, all of your run books sat in OneNote. Yeah, so maybe you've got OneNote, it looks like this. It's got some instructions. This is Git workflow. You've got some descriptions, you've got some pictures. Look, this is some, come on, this is some pictures. We've got a load of stuff. You can see there's quite a lot here. So we can just do Control A and Control C. And now we'll just paste that into here. And would you believe it? Look at this. This is sorcery. I love it. It is absolutely fantastic. Doesn't just work with OneNote. It works with Excel. It works with Word. It works with web pages. Keeps the links in the web pages. Keeps the images in the web pages. It's amazing. How's it doing it? What have we got behind the scenes? Well, we can look at our Markdown. We look at our Markdown, you can see it's basically changed a lot of that into HTML, and this is our image. So basically what it's done is it's converted our images into base 64 encoded images, and then it can display them, which is what it does with the clipboard as well. Pure genius, absolutely magic. I love it. I use it all the time. It is just amazing. Okay, so, oops, where have you gone? There we go.
Apologies, Rob. Another question for you.
No, never apologize. I always have questions. Go for it.
So you showed us a lovely picture of your face as an image on a notebook. Can it be resized?
Oh, what a lovely question. It definitely can't be resized if I look at it like in that view. So let's come out of that view. Let's come back to this one. It cannot be resized. That's an excellent question. Let's have a go. Shane, you know me, I will always try and fiddle and see what we've got. So what we've got is image source equals whole load of base 64. What have we got down the bottom? So my first answer is no, other than it will resize when the notebook happens. Oh, this is fun, isn't it? Watch Rob scroll through many lines of base 64. How far down is this? Come down to here. Well, what happens if we say width equals 25? Yes, I would say that's a yes. Thank you. Who asked that, Shane?
I will get the name for you in a second. It was a Johanna.
Johanna, that is awesome. Thank you very much. I have learned something today. So that's cool. So yes, because this is just HTML with a base 64 encoded image, you can do that. It takes a little bit of messing about, but it can be done. So that's cool. Let's do Control-Shift-P and let's have a new notebook so that I don't make the mistake I made earlier. And we'll go text and we'll say, what is happening? Make that into heading 1. Oh, here we go. And heading 1. I found a problem. This is what will happen. This happens to me all the time. I found on caps lock. I ran a query. There we go. So I run a query. Let's add some code. Got some buttons here. We have a look. Uppy downy buttons. So we can go up and down, or we can delete our code blocks or our text blocks. So we'll move that down to here and we'll say select at. Ooh, that won't work. Server name. Let's add another code cell. Select. No, select. Get date as this is when I did it. There we go. So we've got 2 code blocks here. And we can just press this play button and it's going to say, hey, where do you want me to run this? So we could fill it in here. We could also fill it in up here with this one. Just got to open up the same thing. And we will pick Beard Desktop. That should work. There we go, we're attached, and now we can press play. So we've got Beard Desktop. This is my results. It's going to tell me that one row was affected. It'll tell me how long it took to run the query, and it gave me some results. Excellent. Maybe we'll do this one as well. This is when I did it. So 1st of December, all but 5:45 my time. Now, the reason I point those out is because within the notebook, there's nothing saying when it was run. Okay, you got your date modified time on the file, perhaps. If you're running this as an incident resolution or some sort of run book that needs to be recorded, and it would be useful to know who was running it or when it was run, then I would just add this in as a code block to run at the top. Now, you remember, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock in the morning, I ran a query, and when I came back in the next day, Shane said that I had the wrong answer and it wasn't true, and we had to have a discussion and I couldn't prove it. What happens if I accidentally press this cross button here? I didn't even save the notebook. Shane, what's happened to my results? If I did that in Management Studio or Powershell?
Your results are gone, aren't they?
You'd think so. But luckily, if I reopen my Azure Data Studio, here we go. You can see I couldn't make that typo up again. There is my server name, Beard Desktop. Oh, well, I could have managed that. Well, actually, what I couldn't do is have fudged the time. The time's still the same. How cool is that? Notebook still isn't saved. I can prove this up here. So if we look at this, this circle says the notebook is not saved, the default naming of notebook -1. So let's save this notebook, do Control S, and we will save it as C/temp/ I might have done this quite a few times now. Fun. There we go. Let's just call it fun. Right. Let's get rid of the helpful prompts. Now you can see up here, this notebook is not saved. This notebook has been saved. So let's have a look at how a notebook saves its results. We're just going to run get contents. We'll do C/temp/fun. There we go. And in fact, actually, what I might just do is type that to clip, and then I can get rid of this and it look a little bit nicer here. So we can see that this top bit is the metadata about our notebook. So it is a SQL notebook. It would even have a version if we had a version number. And then this is why we don't tell users to go and change the kernel in between, because it makes a mess of this bit. And then we've got our cells, and we've got a markdown cell. Remember, I put what is happening, I found a problem, I turned on caps lock, I ran a query. And then we have our code cell. This is the code that we're going to have a run. Select our server name. Then we've got our output. Tells us that one row was affected. Tells us, even though it says, I always think that says display data. Tells us how long it took to run the query. And then in this execute result output type, it tells us that we ran it twice. You might not have noticed, but I actually double clicked the play button. And it's going to give us our results. And our results come out like this. Our column names, didn't have a column name, and our data, Beard Desktop. Got the same one for this. Then we get our results, how they are displayed in HTML in a tables format. And this is information of the metadata about the results set. What have we got? Have we got chars, SQL variant, etc., etc. And then we've got another code block. This is when I did it. Here are our results, how long we took to run. Oh, that's cool. So if we talked about having source control, and let's make you a little bit smaller again. Ooh, too small. And you can see I've got something's changed in source control. It was this particular job, and we can see that we made some changes. We changed in our code from SQL 2017 N5 to localhost. And that's nice and easy to see. We could put it on here and change to localhost. Oh no, don't make a commit message like that. So it's because I was running this locally. My commit message is always, why did I make a change? This is why I made a change. So that's nice and simple. Let's do something else with fun. So we will come into our Beard desktop and let's have a look. Pick one of these. So we'll do, that's what we want. Add a code cell and we'll do select star from, oh, let's change ourselves a connection, add Beard desktop, change the database to AdventureWorks, and then we should be able to go human resources. So we've got our IntelliSense dot employee. Excellent. We'll press play. There we are, 290 rows affected. Here we go, we've got all of this information. Yes, I do want to save the changes. Thank you so much. And now we're going to do the same again. So Control Start, we're going to get the content of our notebook again. And this time we're going to have a look at that. So when we have a look at this, let's just look at our last query. Our last query was select star from human resources dot employee. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that this is going to contain some data that we might want to be careful about. We might want to protect it. We might be allowed to query it because the results are never saved. Now the results are saved. We've got to think about this. So we've got 290 rows here. And if we come down and have a look, we can see once we get down to here, remember before we had our fields were our column names. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 columns, and we had 290 rows. So here's row 1. Here's row 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And the problem here is twofold. Yep, we've got, I don't know, is that a birth date? Is that Diane's date of birth? Is this something that we should be keeping protected? These are things that we need to think about. But also, can you imagine if our query just changed something about Michael and Michael became, I don't know, let's say he became the development and research manager instead, and that's what the results came back as. If you can imagine trying to look in a comparison and work out, hang on a minute, which column is that? It's column number 5, right? Hang on, I'll go back up to here, right? Column, oh, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Organizational level, excellent, right? Okay, and then we go down a bit further. It's going to start to get very confusing. So source control for notebooks, super for the documentation side of it, absolute nightmare when it comes to the results. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions for you, actually.
Okay, in which case, let's answer some questions.
Okay. You showed how notebooks can save the results without actually clicking save button. Is that due to autosave?
Yes.
Do you know what happens if that if notebooks crash before autosave kicks in?
If find something wooden. Here we go. Sorry, kitten. There we go. Wooden thing. So far, I've always been lucky enough that I've managed to never have that happen. So tomorrow it's bound to happen. I always do that in my demos. I will just hit close and it'll go. Autosave seems to kick in pretty quickly. They've done a lot of work on that to make it good. It, of course, is absolutely possible that without saving the document, you're going to lose some results. But I've that'll survive reboots. It's I wouldn't bet my house on it, but it's pretty stable.
Yeah, perfect. Is there a way to have one notebook span multiple servers, as in SQL command or something like
that? It depends, is the honest answer. So number one answer to that question, if we do Control-Shift and P, let's create ourselves a new notebook, and we change this one to Powershell. Then obviously, if we use DBA tools or SQL command, then we could say instances equal 1, 2, etc. We could do that, and then do get DBA database SQL instances, and you can see that you get IntelliSense with Powershell as well. So you could do it that way. That's one way of doing it. If you have a notebook that is a SQL notebook, then of course one way of doing it is to do something like this. Yeah. In fact, you might even want to do something like that. I'm going to pick on you because you're there.
Thanks, Rob.
There we go. So that's another way to be able to do it if you want to run different queries. Please be more polite than I would be to Shane, because he's a long way away at the moment. It'll be a while before I can see him. No, I'm just kidding. That's another way of doing it. If you want to be able to run SQL command queries in a SQL notebook and use variables and go against different things, not possible at the moment.
Okay, I suppose the final one is, if you wanted to pass a notebook to somebody else, what is the minimum they would need to install to view the notebook?
If they're only going to view the notebook, all they need to have is a browser, because I would send them to here. I'd send them to GitHub, or I'd send them to a gist. And I do that quite often. I'm often sharing gists of notebooks. So they wouldn't need to have anything installed to be able to just look at a static results of a notebook. So that's the first answer. It means anybody can see a notebook rendered in GitHub. If you were looking about how can they actually run the notebook themselves, they're going to need to have installed Azure Data Studio. And like I said, the first time that you open a notebook, what's going to happen is it's going to come up with a box on this side of the window, and it's going to say we need to install Python and these packages. Is that okay? And my advice is say yes and take the defaults. Don't think I've got Python installed, I'm not waiting for that. Use my Python. It will try. Generally, that seems to cause more more issues because your Python isn't the same as that Python. They've got a nice stable build of Python. They know exactly what's there, and they built the notebook to run against that. So I would use the default versions. So that's going to take a little bit of time to run, and then you can run it. If you want to go further, you can install Anaconda, and you can run it against the local server and do all those sort of funky things that data scientists do as well, and they will run these notebooks.
Perfect, and we're good for a bit.
Say that again.
Perfect, that's all the questions for a bit.
That's all the questions. Awesome. That's so cool. Right, let's look at something else cool. We don't want to save that. We don't want to save that. Now it's gone. Now the results are gone. Now that I don't save it, gone. Let's come over here and what you see here is exactly what I've got on GitHub. So you can go and do any of this. Let's see. What could we do? We could do, this is the code that runs my PowerPoint, and let's do Control and oops. Let's do Control and O. And of course, the code that you want is never where you think it is. I might have too many things there. Right, okay. I won't do that then. What we can do instead is things. Oh, it doesn't matter. In here, we've got DBA tools. And this DBA tools folder, I will have to run in .NET. It's got a create containers notebook, and in this create containers notebook, it will create us, surprisingly enough, some containers, which means that I can show off what we can do in notebooks. And the first thing I need to do is just check that I've got a connection to my notebooks. And if you run some code that doesn't generally put any output, then put some output, because then your user will know that once we have a connection, then everything is good to go. So we have got some notebooks, and I'm going to try and come back into here. Might work, might not. We shall see. And we're running a PowerShell kernel, and we're going to press play. We can see it's spinning, creating a connection. Do we have a connection? Yes, we do have a connection. Now, this is an idea of how you can make use of some of the training. So we could do things like this, but explore a file path from the point of view of our SQL service account. And that's going to show us that we've got a number of files in there because Rob hasn't cleared the containers up. But hey, that's okay. It doesn't matter. So these backups were done at 1442. No, they weren't. These backups were not done at 1442. They were done at 1207. There we go, 1207. So let's have a look at the last time the databases were backed up on our instance. So we press go, and guess what? It's probably going to be about 1207. There's a surprise. Well, maybe we want to actually do some backups. That's really interesting. Why do you like that? We could just go backup DBA database, take the instance name, pass the credential because these are containers, and we'll pass in a path, and it'll just go like that. And there we go. In that much time, we've backed up all of our databases. You see our latest backup is 1804. And if we have a look at our get DBA file, you can see now we've got two backups for every database. We've got the ones that happened at 1207 and the ones that happened at 1804. So that's really cool. We can do our backups, We could keep on going, work our way through, back up to a directory for each database. Hey, this is really cool. You want to learn how to use DBA tools, go and get some notebooks, run the notebook. As long as you've got Docker installed, it's going to download a container, it's going to create some instances for you, it's going to do the authentication, it's going to make all of this stuff happen. It's nice and easy for you to follow, I hope, so that you can actually go and see what's happening. You can do your backups, you can do your restores, you can create an availability group on your own machine just using 2 containers and DBA tools. Follow the steps that we've got here. But having done that, hopefully, I can now do something like this. I'm going to get my audit and I am going to gather some permissions. And let's see. So we've got a notebook that can gather.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Sorry, Alexa, I didn't realize you were going to interrupt my presentation. Made me jump. We will connect to Beard Desktop and we will just have a look at what members we've got. So we've got Andre Kammer. Let's have a look. Sean Melton, Sock Fact. Oh, look at this fella. There we go. Now, what I was going to do was I was going to run my code to randomly assign users to a database and see where Shane appeared. Ooh, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the database role membership that we've got here. So we can look down here and we've got, don't see him. Oh, there he is. Yep. So you're obviously working in the car factory at the moment. That appears to be your responsibility, and yeah, backup operator, data reader. You've got some responsibilities there. So maybe we could do this like that. Now, that's cool, but let's take it another step forward. So with DBA tools and a module called Import Excel, then one thing we could do is, let's not use that, and let's take that one out, is we could run this code. And this code is going to fail very quickly. Do that again. Thank you. And that's going to take all of those permissions and put them into an Excel sheet. Just going to open the Excel sheet, and when we open the Excel sheet, we are going to see that we've written the front page of our worksheet. Tell us some information. The yellow cells are the sysadmin, green cells are the logins. You can filter by database on the object column, and you can filter by user group login on the member column. So let's have a look at the member, and let's find that fella O'Neill. Where's he gone? There he is, and we can see which permissions he's got. So it turns out that at a server level, he's got no permissions, but he's doing a lot of work on the car factory and also obviously involved in releases as well. So he's able to do some releases. So that's really neat. That's cool. Now, there's a PowerShell notebook. We can create some Excel. Our users can make use of that. Maybe our users could run this code. If we look at this notebook, T-SQL, gather permissions to notebook. This button here is the eraser. So when we press that, we're going to have no results at all. I'm going to save that one. And then I'm going to come and you're going to use the service pane, and I am going to manage my instance and make that go away. And I have here these, like I said, we had pretty colors for our Azure Data Studio. We've got this SQL Agent extension. In the SQL Agent extension, we've got notebooks, and it says new notebook job. I'm going to press go for that. So where is the path to the notebook? And that's the bit I always forget to do when I'm doing this demonstration. So let's copy that path. There we go. and new notebook job, and we will say this is my notebook. Storage database. The database to store all notebook job metadata and results. Okay, so I think that should be in the, I was going to say kitten, but actually I think the kitten factory was used last time, so I might say car factory. And then the execution database is the database against which notebook queries should be running. So this is master because we want to do permissions, and we're going to call this the fun job because hey, it's fundamentals, why not? And we could add schedules and description for getting permissions. And we'll say okay. So target database is the car factory. So what we're going to do is we're going to say run. The job was successfully started. And whilst we're running, we're going to come over to our car factory database and look at our tables. And you can see we've got two tables here. We've got materialized and we've got template. We look in our template table, you can see we've got an error. Excellent. Then we've got a job, we've got our notebook. If we have a look at this, there you go, you've seen that before. That's the beginning of the JSON for a notebook, which database we're executing about it, and the last run notebook error, which I wasn't expecting to see. Duplicate column names are not permitted in SQL Powershell. Excellent. And then if we look in our materialized table, we can see our job ID, we can see our notebook, and we can see that we've got an error, which is infuriating. But if we come back to our notebook, okay, see what recent runs, and if we clicked on this, where's it double click? If we double click on this, you can see that what we've got at the top is a notebook that's called the fun job, because that's what I called the job, and the date that it was run. And it's still got our documentation, it's got the code we've run, and it's got all of our results. So we know that this one was run at 18:11:09. We've got all of our results, and for some reason it doesn't like this one. No, okay. But we've got all our results. So the cool thing about that is you could now write a T-SQL notebook. Well, it's got to be a T-SQL, it doesn't work for PowerShell. Write a T-SQL notebook that can run as an agent job, which you could schedule overnight. So if you have something that, you know, maybe an issue that happens at some point in the night, maybe you could set up a job to run a notebook to gather some information and set that job to be triggered from an alert. So then when you come in the morning, you've got a nice notebook with all of your information that you wish to have. So that's me been talking for nearly 75 minutes now, which is fine. I can talk notebooks for all day. Are there any more questions? Would we like to see more things?
So we have a couple of questions. There is a question asking if you have to periodically clear out the results of a notebook to keep the size down.
So the results are going to be refreshed every time you run the code. So it won't get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It doesn't store any history of your code runs. The answer is it depends really, because if your queries are bringing back a gigabyte of data, your notebook's going to be a gigabyte in size and some more because it's all in JSON. And Azure Data Studio is going to struggle to open it. In fact, the agent job that we've just seen, that's probably going to struggle to run it as well.
Okay, so you've actually shown us that a notebook runs on containers, but it works everywhere? It works on the cloud, it works on premises, like in any place it doesn't work?
I've run the notebook against a container, not on a container. So we're querying the container. It's going to be able to query anything that you can query from Azure Data Studio. So Azure Data Studio is designed to work with all supported versions of SQL Server. I can tell you that if you're running queries, just doing T-SQL, it'll go back to SQL 2000 at least. So your notebooks are going to run in the same way against whatever you can connect to here.
Lovely. And the final question was, how would you schedule a notebook? But I think you've just shown us that.
As long as it's a T-SQL notebook, that's how I would schedule a notebook. If you wanted a PowerShell notebook, you probably have to explore Doug Fink's PowerShell code. I think you can run some things in there. It's not something I've got in the ADS notebook module. That'll enable you to create notebooks dynamically and change them from not.NET to .NET or from .NET to not .NET, but I haven't actually got anything to run them.
Perfect. And that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, in which case, unless you have anything else that you wish to particularly see about notebooks, I'm going to say thank you very much.
Rob, thank you. That was very eye-opening on what all the Jupyter Notebooks can do for not just the normal analysts, but also for the production DBA. This was very good, and I know I will start using Jupyter Notebooks even more in my time. So that's awesome for me.
Excellent.
So with that, I do thank you all so much. And thank you very much, Rob, for showing this to us. And so with that, it's now time to close out presentation for the day. So thank you yet again, Rob. And we'll talk to everyone on DBA Fundamentals next time. Have a great day.